Welcome back to Hannity. The New York Times has done it again. This time the paper of record is coming under fire for their investigation into the Benghazi terrorist attack that left 4 Americans dead. The report reads in part, quote, months of investigation by the New York Times centered on extensive interviews with Libyans in Benghazi who had direct knowledge of the attack there and its context turned up no evidence that Al-Qaeda or other international terrorist group had any role in the assault. The attack was led instead by fighters who had benefited directly from NATO's extensive air power and logistics support during the uprising against Colonel Gaddafi. And contrary to claims by some members of Congress, it was fueled in large part by anger at an American-made video denigrating Islam. Joining me now to react to this is one lawmaker who has been leading the investigation into this terrorist attack from the very beginning, Utah Congressman Jason Chaffetz. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Katie.
So the focus now in this New York Times story is back on this video. And I want to, before we get your reaction to the story, I want to play some testimony from Gregory Hicks, who was the last person in Libya at the time who had contact with Ambassador Christopher Stevens before he was killed. Let's take a look at that.
Was there anything in connection to a YouTube video? Was there any awareness that it was the events occurred because of a YouTube video?
The YouTube video was a non-event in Libya.
Okay. And did you know about that within a couple days or the day of?
Yes.
Okay. And so did you report to anyone in Washington within the first couple of days that there was anything in connection, a protest in connection to a YouTube video?
No, the only report that our mission made through every channel was that there had been an attack on a consulate.
Not a protest?
No protest.
So, Congressman, based on the testimony by Mr. Hicks, who has received retaliation for bravely telling us what happened in Benghazi, and the information that your committee has come up with, is there any credibility to say that Al-Qaeda had nothing to do with this attack?
Well, the only ones that believe that are evidently Susan Rice and the author of this article, for a grand total of 2 people in this country. There is not a single person that believes that that is actually true. I traveled to Libya about 21 days after the attack. The entire time I was there in Tripoli, there's not a single person that brought up the video because it was a non-event. It didn't happen. There was no spontaneous, a demonstration that they talk about. I've talked to General Ham, the 4-star general who was in charge of AFRICOM. There was no mention of the video whatsoever. The Accountability Review Board had 90 days with unfettered access to all the witnesses, documents, information. They conclusively said the video had nothing to do with this. You have the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, Mike Rogers. You have Adam Schiff, a Democrat from the committee, saying, yes, Al-Qaeda was actually involved in this. And by the way, the video has nothing to do with this. So there is just a mountain of evidence that suggests it was a terrorist attack. In fact, as my counterpart, Trey Gowdy, a congressman from South Carolina, has just been tenacious on this. As he pointed out in a hearing, on September 12th, the internal email within the State Department said that it was Ansar al-Sharia, they believed, as the perpetrators of this terrorist attack. So I could go on and on for another, but we only have an hour in this program. So right. The mountain of evidence says no. What the New York Times is reporting is just not accurate.
Well, and speaking of evidence, I mean, the 9/11 attack on Benghazi wasn't the first time that we saw threats or attacks, right? So you go back throughout the year, and we had the assassination attempts on the British ambassador. We had multiple threats coming through for Ambassador Chris Stevens, which is why they requested more security. And then, of course, this happened on September 11th. But based on what we've seen in the New York Times story and with the Obama administration, and quite frankly, the Obama campaign in 2012, it seems like they're trying to redefine what Al-Qaeda means. It seems like they're trying to say that unless the orders came from a dead man, Osama bin Laden, that they're not part of Al-Qaeda, when the evidence to the contrary clearly shows that Al-Qaeda has many different branches throughout the world, but especially in northern Africa.
The reality is, the American facility in Benghazi was attacked in April of 2012. Literally 2 months to the day later, our facility again was bombed. They breached the wall. 5 days after that, the British ambassador assassination attempt, the attack on the Red Cross. You have over 300 documented attacks on Western targets and acts of violence there in Libya. The request for more help never came. In fact, they diminished the security profile. You fast forward to Barack Obama campaigning for the presidency of the United States, saying that Al-Qaeda's on the run. And yet days later, 5 days later, I believe it was, we had this attack on our facility, and ever since then, it has been this administration's #1 priority, as best I can tell, to deceive the American people on what really happened. They have not been open and transparent. We have not gotten to the truth. We have yet to hear from a witness in a public setting who was there on the ground in Benghazi talk about what happened. And this, I know the Democrats want to go this to go away. I know they want to peg it as a phony story. But we got 4 dead Americans, and we are going to get to the truth.
Well, speaking of getting to the truth and priorities, we haven't seen the arrest or the men who carried out this attack brought to justice. Is the administration really prioritizing that? It sure doesn't seem like they are.
Well, remember, it took our FBI almost 18 days to get to the scene of this attack. And there hasn't been much evidence that the FBI has been pursuing this with the tenacity that they say did the Boston bombers or somebody else. Nobody's been brought to justice. Nobody's been killed. Nobody's been captured to this point. It's more than a year after. And when you have the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton herself, 5 months after the attack, testify to Congress, what difference does it make? Then you got some pretty good evidence that maybe this administration is not as bent on capturing or killing the people that committed this attack. And my biggest fear is that they now have 3 success stories in Benghazi, the terrorists do, of killing Americans and breaching our embassy, and these people are still out there. Are they going to do it again? I worry that they might.
Well, Congressman, thank you so much for your time tonight. We look forward to what you guys find
Happy New
in
Year.
2014.
Thanks.
Happy New Year. Coming up, he's back. Phil Robertson's suspension from Duck Dynasty has been lifted, but some on the left are accusing A&E of choosing profits over African American and gay people. Next, we'll have a fair and balanced debate on this very topic.